Hi, it's Jason with Daruma Advisors, and sorry I haven't made a video for a little while. Things have been a little bit crazy around the homestead and with the business getting started up. But I did want to come back and talk to you about an area that I've been doing a lot of work on lately, which is around competitive analysis. Um, it's an area that is kind of interesting because it's very valuable on its surface in terms of how it can help businesses make the right decisions about where to take products and strategies. But it's also something that in the current environment isn't getting done quite as much, or maybe given the attention it deserves, because quite honestly, budgets are tight. And this isn't exactly an easy task to do. So this is something that requires a little bit of thought and practice, to be honest. So, just on that thought, one things I wanted to discuss was this is just such an underappreciated art form. And honestly, I think it's a bit of a luxury for a lot of companies these days. People just don't necessarily have the money or resources to do competitive analysis in a fashion that might be justified for their business. And the main reason is not necessarily because of desire, it's because of difficulty. It's a hard thing to do competitive analysis in a robust way. And there's a few reasons for that. The first reason is that how do you integrate this into the business? And what I mean by that is even at the simplest level, who's the consumer of competitive analysis? Is it the sales force? Is it the marketing team? Is it the product and engineering team? Is it your investors and your board and your senior leadership? The answer is really all of the above can use competitive analysis, but they're all going to want different things from it. So because of that, it's really hard to first off define ownership within the business of who owns this process because there's so many stakeholders with diverse needs. The other problem starts to manifest in the sense that when you can't find a good home for it, it kind of sits off to the side and that doesn't really do anything. Or you just outsource it to a company and they're just giving you something back that's fairly generic. So that doesn't exactly hit the mark either. And really, the big part of doing it yourself, and the reason why a lot of companies will turn to like analyst firms like Gartner or Forrester or IDC for this stuff is gathering the data is really difficult. It's really hard. But I'm going to tell you that I've seen light on this, and I think there's some ways to do this a lot easier in this day and age. And the reason why, even though it's underappreciated, but is so helpful is because it just has such insane value to it. It really gives you a ability to take a look at yourself, take a look at your products, and understand where they fit and how they can compete. And that leads to a whole string of decision making you can do in terms of where you're going to invest your resources, in terms of what your roadmap should be, in terms of um, should you maybe even decide to pursue an inorganic path to growth versus continued innovation, right? You know, this is a great way to evaluate whether you want to do a build by partner type of analysis or a great prelude to that. And I'm going to tell you, after 10 years of being an executive in tech companies and pitching VCs or pitching private equity firms or sitting with our board, anybody who's making an investment decision wants to know about this, period. So the fact of the matter is that in order to maybe get that next round of investment, or in order to possibly justify that budget increase, you're going to need to do this type of assessment. However, again, I find that when you're trying to use it as a tool to get bigger investment, pursue an M&A round, whatever that might be, you also want to be really realistic because while you always want to put your best foot forward outbound in the business, the tool set isn't quite as valuable unless it gives a fair assessment of where you are and what steps you need to take to get better and get on a better growth trajectory. Now, this again, I mentioned this before, but the truth is that the AI tools now are able to do so much with readily available market data and or data that you purchase from sources like analyst firms that you can use it in a way that gets you out of the mode of what's the other guy doing today, and it can give you data and show it to you in a light where you can say, here's what I think competitor X might do. I have these gaps, they have different gaps. If I had those gaps, I think I would maybe pursue that market, or I think I would maybe pursue that partnership with somebody. And it starts to allow you to kind of be more futuristic in how you look at the competition versus more uh, rear view window, which is kind of how a lot of folks do it. So before we jump into some of the really interesting new aspects of how to do and approach a competitive analysis project, let's talk about kind of what I call the least valuable approach, which is the one that people do 90 something percent of the time, which is this whole kind of idea of doing a Harvey Ball analysis. You build a table, it's got a bunch of columns. The columns have certain product attributes or features, or company attributes and features for that matter. And then the rows are maybe your product, your company's product, maybe even multiple products from your company if you have overlapping products. And then you kind of compare them and say, well, this one's a little better than this in terms of, say, you know, integration with, operating systems, or it's better in terms of cost or whatever that might be. These things are horrible, right? I do not. I am somebody who's prepared many of these, and I feel like that they're just not a useful tool for so many reasons. I think they're a great band-aid to get you through maybe a sales call or maybe get you through a board meeting. But the truth is, if you want to do this right, you have to look at it in a different way. And the reasons are pretty simple. First off, if you're creating the columns and rows, or your internal team is, they're going to do it in a way that shows you in the best light. All right. And that just basically kind of invalidates the criticality of this in terms of how you're doing. You want to put your best foot forward. It's just a natural thing. The analysis tends to be based on history, right? Especially in long life cycle products or products that have been around for a while. There's been many instances where I've prepared one of these, or somebody on a team's prepared one of these, or I've seen one in a pitch deck, and you'll see that something is, that was true a year ago, but it isn't true now because of a new release they have, or it isn't true because, they changed that set of architectures, or they got acquired and now they have a whole new set of capabilities. Um, when you kind of do the backwards looking and somewhat biased formula of doing these, it kind of gives you a false sense of comfort, right? It makes things look like they're safer than they might be vis-a-vis the competition. That's generally not a good thing. And the other thing is that I find that people don't always, they look at it from a feature function type of capability. Like, we have this feature, do they, right? They have this feature, do we not, right? Those types of things. But the truth is what are the features that customers want, right? That's the competitive analysis. Just because they have a feature or you have a feature that nobody has, who cares? So you have to really think about that. And what I'm finding is that the reason that I'm kind of pushing back on these, and I'm seeing other folks begin to back on them in the market, is because really these are great tools for people who sell feature function stuff. And when you think about a solution selling mindset, or selling more complex solutions that exist in the tech world today, you're going to find that this is the type of thing that kind of is when you're in a margin or a pricing battle. This is a sales tool that gets used for that in markets that are, let's say partly or even fully commoditized. So, these tools are really not good for helping you make your solution look better and kind of casting the overall solution and the value to the customer and the proper value proposition of the customer. It's kind of an ancient tool for an ancient set of sales tactics, if you will. So how do we go from the Harvey Ball method to something a little more modern, something that kind of is more inclusive and holistic to help people understand what's going on? And so step one in the new school approach is really just looking at the landscape overall. And when I say the landscape, I don't just mean here's the top 5 people in this market according to the Magic Quadrant or the Wave or whatever framework analyst, or publication puts out there, right? I'm talking about who's in this market overall. The technology world's a pretty dynamic space. There's a lot of startups, there's a lot of new ventures. Everybody has their own kind of angle on it. And by the way, those startups could also be methods by which a bigger company may acquire them to get that capability and make themselves stronger. They may acquire other competitors to make an overall better solution. So you really want to look at the whole market to get a good feel for the landscape and what the new types of capabilities or the new types of architectures can deliver. Then, of course, there's you. You have to be honest with yourself about where you're at, and what you're doing. I don't think you have to be staring at your shoes the whole time, but I think you have to look at this in the sense of, um, from a deal perspective. So, what I mean by that is, why are you winning? What are the things that you stand out? Why are you losing? So, this is where working with a sales force to get a real good feel for win loss analysis is huge, because you start to understand kind of your ups and downs and gives you kind of a good at least coarse picture of not only the columns upon which to evaluate yourself, but also a realistic expectation of what is good and bad about you and your product and your business. The other thing that's important is what I'm going to call investment. And what I say about that is, if you're seeing companies changing direction away from a product category, you saw, I'll just give an example from say 10 years ago where you had on-premise Java middleware being developed, the WebSpheres and the WebLogics of the world, and Red Hat had offerings called JBoss and so forth. Well, when cloud really started to get going and kind of continuous integration started going in the cloud, those tool sets were no longer getting a lot of investment. They're moved into more of a sustaining mode to keep the existing basic customers happy. They weren't in growth mode anymore. And if you start to see your competition talking and pivoting towards something else, it's a sign that the investment in the area maybe you're competing is going down, and that should tell you something, right? So investment is also tied to market heat, right? It's not only what you see your competitors doing, but it's also what you see going on in the market in terms of who's getting press, what are the topics getting press, what are the attachments to your product category to that topic. If you think about like something new like AI, and you think about where cybersecurity was, say, 4 or 5 years ago versus where it is now, if you don't have an AI story for your cybersecurity tool, you're probably falling behind, if not already left in the dust, right? You have to kind of look at the market trends and see where things are going, and make sure that if there is an attach point for you into that market, you have an answer, right? So market heat is also another area which is really, really important, especially as you start trying to think less about reacting to the market and start thinking about where you want to go and how you want to grow. The other big challenge isn't just kind of an overall broad understanding of not only the competition, but where the market's moving, but you have to also move to context, right? So outside of, we'll call it, uh, what the market's doing, you also have to look at yourself in terms of your gaps against the market, right? And the simplest way to look at that is, if you're going to put your best foot forward, you have to assume your competition is as well. And when you start to compare your best stories, references, data sheets, all that material, analyst reports, awards, all that stuff, and product specifications, and you compare it against their best, right? That the kind of result of that division is ultimately, what are the market gaps, and where do you stand in context of your other competition? And that's really important, because what you're starting to see in the market is a lot more verticalization of technology products, where companies are saying, you know what, I can't be the next platform of choice. Everybody wants to build a platform. So I'm going to focus in on a specific set of use cases, or I'm going to focus in on a specific set of verticals. And so when you start to get to that level of granularity in terms of your go-to-market strategy, you really have to understand the market gaps, because that might be where you find a niche where you have a unique set of competitive differentiators to go and take that market, versus the generalized horizontal set where you may not have capabilities that everybody needs, but certain people really, really want. So it's not just about kind of looking at the market gaps and saying to yourself, oh, boo hoo, I need X to go, it's also a question of, okay, if I have this market gap, or I have this market advantage, conversely, where can I take this to get a good size of growth? And this really kind of ties back to the whole like crossing the chasm types of discussions, and those types of things that companies look for, especially in the early stages of development. The last step is, what are you going to do? Right? I mean, ultimately, you're going to generate this report, you're going to start to show it to people, but you have to kind of come back and look at this in a way that goes, how are we going to alter the business to make this product more successful? Right? It's not just, hey, let's put more features in the product, right? That could be one possible outcome, but generally that one takes the most time, and in some cases costs the most money. So that may not be your best choice, especially if you're just kind of setting off in a new direction. You may have to be a bit more pragmatic. Just remember this, is that when you're looking at a competitive analysis, the best thing to do, again, is look at it across, how does the company best support the product set or the portfolio or offerings? Because great products are out there and they lose all the time, right? The better technology product does not guarantee a win in the marketplace. In fact, if you look at the market in any industry, not just technology, you find that there's a lot of mediocre products out there that are marketed by companies that have other capabilities or certain market strength or market pull. And those products often win, even though they're not the best, right? There's been a million stories over the years on that topic, right? But when you come out of a competitive analysis, this is the ideal time to take a look and decide, well, do we have to rethink our plan? Are we on the right track? Do we have to make adjustments? Have we accounted for these gaps? You may run a competitive analysis on yourself every, say, 6 months maybe, and you present it to your board, and you want to be able to use that as a set of operational KPIs to show your improvement in terms of innovations, customer experience, go to market, distribution, whatever those different areas you want to improve in your business to grow are that are tied to your strategy. This is a great tool by which to kind of benchmark yourself and see how you're doing against not only the market, but also your previous benchmarks from the past. Like, where did you improve, right? And this is actually really cool. And this is where I've seen some of the most exciting things about using large language models in particular to bring together and look at for patterns in the data, especially textual data that's spread across, say, thousands and thousands of websites, right? You can start to really hone in on capabilities and how they overlap with each other. So now instead of it being like, I'm going to like a hub and spoke type of thing where I compare myself to competitor X, Y, and Z. Now it's, hey, I want to look at everybody who has virtualization technology built into their solution. That could be hundreds of companies, right? And then you could say, okay, well, which ones have these 6 capabilities of those hundreds? And you start to filter things out very fast. And that filtration process also starts to stack against that competitive framework that you've designed with capabilities. And you can start to look at these things, right? Okay, and you go, well, that's great, Jason, but now I'm still looking at this from a historical perspective. Right. But what you can start to do is then associate that data with other data sets that allow you to start to make predictions. So, for example, right, you may find that there's 2 companies that have very different gaps in that pile and they're very complementary. One being quite large, the other being quite small. Well, geez, is that going to be, do you think that this company is going to, with these gaps, there's 10 startups working on this particular piece of technology, but the bigger company has a huge gap there. Well, they're going to acquire something probably, right? They're going to shore up their business. So you start to say, well, geez, I think in the next 24 months, company X might be buy company 1, 2, or 3, right? And these are the 3 or 4 companies they might buy. And we should maybe give some consideration to how we're going to respond to that when that happens, right? Another way to use the AI data to predict it is to actually look at it in the capacity of who's under investing, who's over investing, and you can start to build a heat map of that to see where there might be some soft spots. For example, a company gets acquired, they go in a different direction because the acquirer has a different market space, a different set of verticals they're going after. Well, they may begin to de-emphasize markets where you may have a competitive strength. And that may open a bigger door for you than you're already exploring. It might cause you to want to predict forward that, hey, we're going to have a lot of disenfranchised customers. So you can really start to use the large data sets as a better way to kind of play chess and really think through what's going to happen down the road. So the real question is, how do you get this done? This might sound awesome, but you start to think, well, it sounds hard. And the truth is that you really do need massive data sets and massive sets of information to do this. The good news is that there's an enormous amount of that stuff out in like large language models off the shelf today. There's also companies, for instance, Daruma is partnering with a company called the Spalier, and they actually have a data set for tech companies that they've already built. So you can begin to do this analysis in a very rapid fashion. It also can lead to outputs like competitive sales guides and so forth, not just Harvey Ball pictures, but you can actually get to the point where that you can generate deliverables to hand to your team. So I guess what I would say is that the data is out there. There are companies already working on how to use AI to tap the potential of this data. So looking outdoors for help is a good idea. Additionally, looking outdoors and competitive is just a good practice because, quite honestly, it's a good antidote to bias, right? It's a way to kind of prevent your team from taking you down a path that maybe you don't want to go down. And then the nice part about it is once you have this rich data set, you can begin to understand the market in new ways. But not only that, but you can start to package and because you've saved the time from pulling this data from all these places and doing all the analysis, it allows you to actually focus on the part that matters the most, which is building the right end deliverables and outputs to the right stakeholders so they can make the decisions that make the most sense to them. And I think that's the best part about AI in general is that AI isn't here to replace it. It's really to kind of replace certain tasks that may be difficult or even in some cases impossible to achieve. So that was all I had to say, but we could certainly help with this. This is an area at Daruma. I have a lot of experience in doing competitive analysis in general over the years. With the combination of myself and Espalier, we're now able to bring that tool set together in new ways for us to go and help you figure out how to attack the market and grow. So um, if you're interested, please let us know. You can check out our website. You could tune and subscribe and like the videos on my channel here on YouTube, or you could look us up on LinkedIn. Okay, well, thanks a lot. Hopefully this was helpful, and have a great day.